Hey, everybody, this is the Rotary E-Club of Silicon Valley, and every week we strive to find wildly interesting people from around the world to tell us stories of how they make the world better, how they're working with people to make the world better, locally, globally, digitally. And that's a part of how we see the world as Rotarians. We're members of Rotary International, 1.4 million Rotarians and Rotaractors, and 36,000 plus clubs around the world. And we are one of them. Ours being the Rotary E-Club of Silicon Valley. Many of us, not all, plurality, I believe, are in Northern California, but we have members across 12 countries around the globe, people who believe that technology has a role to play in serving the business of service. So with that, we will introduce our speaker for today. For today is an astronomer. He is part of the University of Texas at Austin's McDonald Observatory. He is the Dark Skies Initiative Coordinator, and he will be talking to us today about preserving dark skies through partnerships. Welcome, everybody, and welcome our speaker, Stephen. It is good to have you. I hand the mic over to you.
Thank you, Rushton. It's a pleasure to be here. So again, my name is Stephen Hummel. I work at the University of Texas at Austin's McDonald Observatory. McDonald Observatory is not in Austin. It's actually in far West Texas, several hundred miles from Austin. And the observatory has kind of three main functions. One is we're an astronomical research center where we have some of the largest telescopes in the world. We are one of the most visited research observatories in the world. So we do a lot of public outreach. We see around 60,000 up to 100,000 visitors per year. And we also support the University of Austin, as well as other universities' higher education programs. So astronomers come to train here, learn how the science is done and how to use the equipment. But all these functions depend heavily on having dark skies, obviously, to see the stars better. And that's a large reason why McDonald Observatory is located out in far West Texas, in what we call the Big Bend region of far West Texas. Most noteworthy member of that region is Big Bend National Park. So there we are on the map. You can see we're kind of off in the middle of nowhere, off in the mountains. We're about 7,000, 8,000 feet. But the problem all observatories eventually end up facing is the problem of light pollution. And light pollution, simply defined, is light that is wasted or shining up into the night sky and thus washing out your view of the stars. Because of light pollution, 80% of Americans can no longer see the Milky Way. And globally, about a third of the world's population can no longer see the Milky Way from where they live. But the problem is mostly just lights that are angled up into the sky, or perhaps your neighbor's light shining into your bedroom. It's probably frustrating you. That's light pollution as well. So it's frustrating for astronomers. It's frustrating for a lot of people who have to live next to sources of light pollution. And there's a lot of other reasons it's frustrating too, which I'll get to. The good news is we don't really have to deal with light pollution, at least in theory. There are easy solutions to this problem. If everyone were to simply shield their lights, making sure they're aimed down, basically, not shining into your neighbor's property, not shining up into the night sky and wasting it. And if everyone were to use a more amber color or yellow color, which doesn't scatter as much in the air, and only use the intensity of light they need. And lastly, turn lights off when they're not using it, then the problem of light pollution will be solved. This is one of the few environmental problems that, in theory at least, could be solved overnight if everyone wanted to, right? Unlike water pollution or air pollution, which even if everyone were to suddenly do everything perfectly right, the problem would persist for a while longer because of previous poor decisions. But that's not true with light pollution. It could be fixed instantly if everyone got together and did it. So even though we're located out in far West Texas, in the past 10 years, we've seen a huge growth in light pollution, in particular from the Permian Basin, which are the oil fields, where there are thousands of wells and associated equipment in that area. So it's that the light from the Permian Basin is now larger in extent than from the city of El Paso and Juarez, which is over several million people. So this is a huge area. Per capita, the Permian Basin is the most light polluted place on Earth, meaning there aren't that many people there living there full time, but it's very brightly lit. So The problem basically isn't knowing the solution, right? We know what could be done to fix it. The problem is, how do we get thousands of people and all of this industry to change their lighting, right? Why should they care? Why should they adopt the lighting practices that we recommend? Well, the basic idea is that good lighting practices are a win-win solution from every perspective. And that's really the key to our whole dark sky initiative and why this movement has been so successful. Regardless of who you are or whether or not you care about stars, you stand to benefit from better lighting practices. The main, probably the most obvious way someone like an oil and gas operator could benefit is by saving energy and money. If you're not wasting so much light, that's better for your bottom line. And you don't have to use as much light to get the same effect. So therefore, you can save money just by using less energy. It's also better for human health. That might be surprising to a lot of people, but if you just consider that all life on Earth, including humans, evolved under a day and night cycle, or what we call our circadian rhythm, which basically tells your body, when to sleep, when to be awake, but also regulates functions like digestion. It regulates your body temperature, a whole host of other things. If you're exposed to too much artificial light at night, especially if it's unwanted, that can cause serious health concerns, including depression. It's been linked to diabetes. It's even been linked to things like breast cancer. So there are serious health implications here. It's better from a safety perspective. Shielded lights don't produce nearly as much glare. It provides much more even visibility, better illuminating hazards. And it's better for the environment. Just as humans are affected, so are many different wildlife species. A notable example are migratory birds. This area of Texas happens to be a major migratory bird corridor where billions of birds pass overhead as they migrate, towards Toronto and that general area every spring, and then the reverse in the fall. And they use the stars to navigate, and they're drawn to artificial light sources. So it's better for wildlife. It's better for the environment to use night sky friendly lighting. And it's better for human culture. I think it's rather sad that most people have never really seen the true beauty of the night sky, that we sort of lost touch with it. I like to say astronomy is the oldest science. Ever since people have had eyes to perceive the sky with, they've been connecting with it and understanding it in their own way. If we can no longer see the stars, we lose that source of inspiration and connection with our past. And it's better for tourism, especially in this region of Texas. Astrotourism is a big part of the local economy. And of course, it's better for research. But notice I put that last because I care about high redshift Lyman alpha galaxies. I don't think most people do, right? So there's, again, regardless of your perspective, we realize that there's something that someone can find appealing about this. So if we wanted to make broad scale changes, we kind of adopted this strategy. The first step in that strategy was to create good examples of lighting in local communities that we could point to. And that consisted of sometimes donating fixtures, working with people who we knew were going to be sympathetic to the cause to create better lighting examples that other people could see and then model their own businesses and homes after. And then we started to recognize those examples officially. We developed an official recognition program. So here's an example of a community center in a local small town. We donated 2 of the fixtures there on the left with good ones. They replaced the rest on their own because they liked them so much. We gave them our seal of approval. Here's a large oil and gas facility that we worked with. It's several $100 million facility. This is several acres. It's a huge site. And they too use this style of lighting because it's better for worker safety. It saves them money and the workers like it. Here's an example of our courthouse building. This is actually a sheriff's office. So law enforcement was on board too. They realized that excessive lighting doesn't necessarily improve public safety. It's using more reasonable lighting is perfectly acceptable from their perspective. There's a local business. Again, I like to say it's good for tourism. So here's an Airbnb in a local community that uses good lighting. Here's a liquor store. So we have a large variety of businesses that we got into this recognition program to serve as community examples. The second step was community outreach and education. So through our visitor center at the observatory, we do a lot of science outreach, and we incorporated the dark skies concepts into the visitor center programs. And then we also did community outreach, going out, talking to people, doing even just on the sidewalk, local events, Earth Day event in the example in the picture there, and as well as working with events inside our national and state parks nearby about the night sky. And then probably the real key to the success of our dark sky initiative is creating partnerships. So we partnered with some organizations that we knew were already familiar with the benefits of good lighting and the value of dark skies. And those include Texas Parks and Wildlife, the National Park Service, and CONAMP, which is the Mexican equivalent of the National Park Service. And we also partnered with other more local organizations like the Big Bend Conservation Alliance, which are concerned about environmental issues in this area, Texan by Nature, which is a large nonprofit that works with businesses to adopt more environmentally friendly practices in Texas. And then the Nature Conservancy, which owns a large nature preserve that mostly surrounds the observatory. And so they kind of have served as a buffer for dark skies for a long time for us. And then we partnered with some that may not be quite as obvious, at least at first. And those include chambers of commerce, downtown associations, visitor centers in the area, because astrotourism is a big portion of the local economy. So getting their support was I think, and to some outsiders, not obvious, but from their perspective, it makes perfect sense. If people are coming here to see the night sky and our economies are becoming dependent on it, we don't want that growth to then jeopardize the very thing they came for. So the partnerships with chambers of commerce and people who are promoting tourism was straightforward in that regard. And then we partnered with local artists to try to get it, basically to recognize the role of the night sky in local culture and the arts community as a source of inspiration. So the nearby town of Marfa, close to the observatory, is known internationally as an arts hub, mainly by the Donald Judd and the Judd Foundation, who kind of started the whole movement back in the 80s and 90s. And then we tried to organize all of these efforts together. And that's the key to this real strategy is, yes, various organizations have an interest in dark skies. We want to recognize that. But then we wanted to create a movement around dark skies that didn't just belong to the observatory, right? So it wasn't just astronomers telling people what to do, but a more of a grassroots effort for everyone in the area to take pride in our dark skies, because we have some of the darkest skies left in the United States. And that's a precious resource. In fact, we partnered with all of the parks in the area, all of the communities, all of the counties are on board. And then because of our partnership with CONAMP, the Mexican National Park Service, we're able to get protected lands on the other side of the border involved as well. So we created a goal, right? We have all these partners. We're doing good things. We're installing better lighting. Everyone's adopting these practices, but we wanted a formal recognition of what we've accomplished. And that was accomplished earlier this year. We were designated a dark sky reserve by the International Dark Sky Association. In fact, we're the largest recognized area by the IDA, the International Dark Sky Association, at over 15,000 square miles. And we are one of just 2 areas in the world that are recognized that cross an international border. The other benefit that this recognition has is it sort of not only organized efforts, but it created a common pool of resources, literature and knowledge that all of the different organizations could pull from to then take to their respective organizations, as well as volunteers, which are really critical to this movement as well. And then the other thing we did was we try to get in the news. This is, I think, a really important part of it, right? You want to stay in the conversation. You want people to be talking about it, and you don't want to be the only organization talking about it. You want others to sort of, use their own voices in the public space to increase awareness. And lastly, step 6. Right, we've accomplished a lot of goals. Light pollution has fallen 23% since 2019, since we started this effort. So that's a huge improvement in a relatively short amount of time. We want to make sure we keep that momentum up. So we are working with the local municipalities and governments, and they are doing large scale retrofits and swaps of their lighting infrastructure to make it all dark sky compliant. And we're working with private businesses as well to make sure everyone is in compliance within the next 5 years. So we have a timeline we're working towards still, even though we have the status, the work isn't done. And then we have annual reports to the IDA just to document progress, to share with the rest of the world what we're doing and make sure everything is carefully documented, because it's really useful to look back and see what we've done and see what, for other people to see what we've done too. All right. Well, that wraps it up. So I'm happy to take any questions.
Fantastic, Stephen. Thank you so much. Let's do this. What I'd like to do is introduce the group that we have. I'll have you go ahead and stop sharing for a moment, and we'll introduce these folks. When I call your name, please wave. So joining us from the Rotary Club of Eugene Metropolitan in Oregon is Heather Edwards. From District 7040 Passport in Greater Toronto, we have Chris Cochran. We have joining us here in California, our guest, Mike Bowler. Good to have you, and representing Q. Our club paella master, Shag Shagrin. Our club treasurer, who is in Italy, where it is quite dark at the moment, Cecilia Becker. Our club president-elect up in Vancouver, Nick Lagarde. And guests from the Quenny organization, Melanie Zate and John Traw. Good to have you all with us today. So one thing everybody should know that I will start going through the questions as they've appeared in the chat. If you have a question, you can either put, I have a question, and I'll have you unmute, or I can read a question if you type it out for me. Either way. Stephen, let's start with this. The idea of developing partnerships in order to achieve these kinds of environmental goals, right? It's really beautiful that you guys are working from so many different angles to do this. Do you sit down together and essentially plan and strategize how to approach different groups and think in terms of like, what is it that we can do to really make this a win-win for everybody? How do you approach that?
Yeah, absolutely. So, we definitely, have to sort of tailor our message to our audience, which is sort of communications 101, right? But, if I, for example, I'm going to be working with an oil and gas company, the people I'm probably going to try to get in contact with first would be the safety personnel or their environmental sustainability and governance, or ESG supervisors, which is business lingo basically for making sure they're responsible at a corporate level. And my message to them would stress the safety benefits, the cost savings, and as well, of course, is the good PR that they get from participating. Whereas other organizations, for example, the Nature Conservancy, it's much more about tailoring the message on why the lands that they protect, why their nocturnal environments that live there are so precious and valuable. So, for example, when I was in this area, we have an endangered firefly species that only lives here, which are very sensitive to light pollution. And so I had to do a lot of reading on biology and what habitats do they need? What do they, why are they so threatened and so forth, and present that as an example of, why they might be interested. But yeah, absolutely. There's a lot of strategizing that goes into it. And I learned a lot about many different things, huge, topic basically, in order to, do my job.
Perfect. So question from Mike Volmert. He says, I'm aware that Flagstaff, Arizona is a city certified as a dark sky city. Can you comment on how someone might introduce or champion an effort in their home city to promote dark skies?
Yeah, absolutely. I would look for a branch of the International Dark Sky Association, IDA, in your area. They're a pretty widespread group. Look if there's already a branch where you are. If not, look into starting one and get in touch with them on what is involved. And then speak with your representation in the city, your city council member, and tell them that you care about this topic. And I had to do a lot of educating of public officials, right? I think some of the ones that live in the smaller towns out here were already familiar with it, but dealing with some of the larger cities, this is a really new topic. And you have to sort of, I recommend actually just taking them to a dark site and seeing the night sky. I find that's the number one way to make someone understand, is get them out under a sky, look at the stars and appreciate it. That's the main way I find that message really like sinks in, I think. But yeah, reach out to the IDA would be the first step.
Excellent. Heather, you have a question.
Thank you, Rushton. Thank you, Stephen, for the work you're doing is incredible, and you're doing it in such a strategic way. I think a lot of folks have great ideas, but this right down the line is efficient and makes sense for everyone. I have two questions. I'll dovetail on Mike's question. How might Rotary clubs, we're able to promote initiatives and projects and programs. I'm looking at the IDA website and I'm not seeing where to look for like my city or my county.
Well, it might be, there is a page for it, although it is a little bit harder to find. You can just contact them. I would just contact them directly and send a message saying, I want to do something in this area. Is there an organization? And there might not be, right? There might not be anyone in your area who's involved. But yeah, I mean, they have a lot of materials on how to talk about the topic. To like step one, educate yourself. I have the really Spark Notes version, but this is actually a really complex topic. You can get a PhD in dark sky studies, right? So, but educate yourself a little bit. There's some great resources on their website as well as on our website, BigBendDarkSkyReserve.org, and that kind of go over the topic. The IDA has some kind of pre-made materials about, like what good lighting practices are. Like, for example, on your own home, how to look at your own home in a way that is sort of, a critical lens to make sure you are following their own principles. But yeah, they have a lot of great resources. They also, I think coming up, have a conference called Under One Sky, which is public, and they have a lot of great speakers lined up already. Yeah.
Thank you. My second question is easier, I think. Does this affect butterflies? We hear a lot about migratory paths for birds. What about our butterfly friends?
Absolutely, 100%. Yeah. Insects are extremely affected by light pollution, especially all the big pollinators, moths, butterflies, bees, and all the ones we don't like, cockroaches and mosquitoes, not really as affected, unfortunately. But no, yeah, absolutely. Bright lights attract insects. In particular, blue light attracts them. So if you go to the hardware store and look on the shelf and you see a bug light, and you're like, what's a bug light? What does that mean? Does it attract bugs? No, all it really is a yellow light that filters out all of the blue component. And most insects can't see or are not as sensitive to red or yellow light. So they won't, some of them are, fireflies are one, but most of them aren't. So it won't attract them as much. But yeah, absolutely. It's a big part of the dark sky movement.
All right. So a quick question that comes in. So you mentioned that Big Bend Dark Sky Reserve is one of two that cross a national border. What is the other one?
Waterton Glacier National Park. So the Glacier National Park and then Waterton on the other side, the Canadian side.
All right. Well, speaking of Canada, our treasurer Nick has a question. Nick, go ahead and unmute and let's have.
Yep. Yeah. So I guess my question is, it seems obvious. Like, I mean, I've really appreciated when I can finally get dark sky. And I remember as a kid having pretty dark skies and then, something down the road moves in like it was a car sales lot. While it seems like there's a ton of benefits, I assume that the big thing is that it's a cost up front. Like if you don't plan it in your capital project, if you have to do it as a retrofit, it costs a bunch of money. Is that the basic barrier?
Yeah, that is one of the barriers. I always try to get to developers before they start construction because it can be cheaper if you incorporate it from the start. It usually does save you money, but if you have to replace everything you already bought, then you've wasted a bunch of money on bad lighting. So to help offset that, what we did was we set up basically a donation system. That was one of the things Big Bend Conservation Alliance did. They raised about $50,000 to help lower income families and communities swap the lights out for them. In fact, they even were able to give them an incentive. So the local utility company will do the labor for them. The owner of the light gets a $50 gift card to the local grocery store, and they don't have to lift a finger or pay a cent, and then they get a better light installed. So that's how we did. That's how we strategized it. Obviously, that requires a fundraiser, which is work, but we've had great success with it. The other thing, if it's a larger facility, a large corporation or something, or a car dealership that doesn't have good lighting, it's harder, but you can always make the case to do shielding, so aiming it down. A lot of the worst offenders I see are floodlights that are angled up when they could easily just be angled down and do the same exact thing. And then the ground would actually be brighter. It would actually be better with no glare. And they're already on adjustable hinge, but they just I want to illuminate everything. So they tilt them all the way up. I see that all over the place. And once I've mentioned this, you're going to see it too, right? But part of my goal when I give these presentations is to give you all what I call the curse, which is that from now on, wherever you go, you will notice all the bad lighting and you'll never be able to unsee it. But yeah, that's that. Anyway, I hope that answers your question.
Great curse to be afflicted with. So a question that came in from Shags about what about the possibility of changing zoning laws? And I'm curious personally, if you're thinking about partnerships as part of the reason you might be hesitant to take approaches that have to do with legal restrictions on lighting.
Right. Well, no, we do both. So we definitely wanted to get community support and make partnerships first, but also it is the law in the area. So if there is a particular person who's just not cooperative, which is very rare, then we could pursue legal action because they would, threaten our research operations. But so if you wanted an example of a dark sky ordinance, you could look at Flagstaff. They've got one. And all of the ordinances, there's 13 in all to encompass the whole area, are available on our website, McDonaldObservatory.org. So you can kind of look and see what each of those communities did. They're all broadly similar, but generally speaking, enforcement of, ordinances is a last resort, right? What we want to do first is work with them, get them to understand that it's in their interest and it benefits them to install good lighting. And if they can't do it financially, find a way to support them. And if all other options fail, then we go the enforcement route. But I think it's only been done twice out of all of the situations I'm aware of.
Yeah. And I would tie in that actually it's on the other end, because to your point of getting to developers, if you can make it a requirement in the first place, then like you said, the laws around your area, it just makes it easier, I assume. A whole lot easier. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. The main goal of the ordinance is to legitimize it and provide an easy sort of metric for like building codes and stuff. Since any developer, they're going to, okay, what's the local building code? When they pull that, they're going to see the lighting and they know what to do. So it streamlines the process. And even if I don't get to them and talk to them, they would have seen it in the ordinance.
Yeah, last question before we wind down the recording. And this is from Melanie. And she asks if you could speak to the benefits of LED lighting as a tool for addressing dark skies issues and perhaps associated possibilities related to visibility especially for drivers with visibility issues, things like that.
Yeah. So LEDs they're one of those things that they're overall probably a good thing, but it gets complicated because LEDs are so much cheaper and they're energy efficient. It's resulted in what we call the rebound effect, where if let's say you have 1,000 watts that you're using for lighting, and then an LED comes along and you could have, I'm fine with, using 1,000 watts and I can have 5 times more lighting. I'll just do that. Right. So instead of taking the cost and energy savings, they're trading that for more light. So it's sort of accelerated the growth of light pollution worldwide. It's going really, really quickly. And that's part of what we're doing But there's nothing inherent to the technology, right? It's just an awareness problem. There are certainly almost all the lights that I recommend these days are LEDs. What's crucial to look for is that color. The color is really important because the more blue it is, not only will it attract insects and wash out the stars more, but it creates more eye strain and it creates more glare, which is especially problematic while driving. I think that's why people hate modern headlights. Right. I think that's one thing that I found is universal. Nobody likes really bright car headlights shining at them, and it seems like, why is it so much worse these days? It's worse not just because the headlights are brighter, but because they're more blue, and blue light is much harder and harsher on the eyes at night. So if everyone went with LEDs that were the proper illumination levels and more of an amber color, it would have great effects for safety, visibility, and cost savings.
Fantastic. And so interesting. Stephen, thank you so very much. Before I hand it back to you, let me do some of the standard wind down for us. Everybody, we thank you very much for joining us. We hope that you are intrigued by the kinds of things you learn in our weekly programs with people from around the world. We hope that you are interested in the mission of Rotary, service above self, and how to make the world a better place. And that you will come back and see us again. Let us know you were here. There is an attendance form just a little bit farther down on our Rotary.cool is our site, Rotary.cool, our Silicon Valley Rotary.com meeting page. At the very bottom, you can leave us a comment. In the Discuss forum, there is a place for you to be able to speak to the different things you saw in this program, as well as any other part of the meeting, and you can reply to what other people have left as well. As we always like to do, we hand it back to our speaker for the final word. Stephen, what would you like people to have in mind as they step away from the video?
Yeah, go outside and look at your own lights tonight and see if you're dark sky friendly. And you can head to our website, bigbendarkskyreserve.org or darksky.org for the IDA and learn more about the topic. Thank you so much.
Wonderful. Thank you, everyone, and we will see you next week.